Hello, viewers. Tim Pool here on the Huddle, and I'm with Grainne Hurst, CEO of the Betting and Gaming Council. Grainne, thanks for joining me.
Pleasure, Tim. Pleased to be here.
So we have plenty to discuss. Unless people have been living under a rock for the last few months in the UK market, they'll understand that we've got some big topics ahead. To start with, though, most recently Michael Dugher announced there was an announcement that he's moving on as chairman. Could you maybe talk us through a bit of maybe what the process is going to be there, but also reflect on, of course, a big contribution from him to the BGC?
Yeah, so I've been really lucky to have Michael as my chair and mentor for the last 18 months, obviously as I transitioned into the CEO role, but also worked with him closely when I was a member of the BGC. I think he's effectively the founding father, if you like, of the BGC because he set it up. He gave it the structure, the purpose, the integrity. He drove the championing of industry standards, and it will therefore leave a really positive, lasting legacy for the BGC. Obviously, big boots to fill. We're currently going through the process of looking at what we might need in that role going forward, and then hopefully we'll be able to start recruiting soon. But I'm sure he'll continue being a friend and an advocate for us as an industry, as he always has been.
Yeah, and I imagine you personally will probably be quite involved in that process because you'll be working very closely with the new chairman.
Yeah, exactly. I think obviously with the tax increases, it's a chance to kind of pause and reflect. What does the next kind of year, 2, 3 years look like for the industry, and therefore what do we need in that position to help us achieve that?
I'm glad you mentioned the tax increases. I've been here for over 7 years, and every year there's been some discussion, some threat of taxes might go up this year, and it didn't really happen, especially to this degree, until this day. I guess with a few months, or a couple of months, how do you reflect on, the fact that we are now living in this new reality in the UK?
Yeah, it's still incredibly disappointing for everybody that works in the industry. Obviously, 109,000 people employed in and around the sector. Obviously high street jobs, but also high skilled jobs in tech outside of London, in and around the country. So really hugely disappointing result for them from the government. It's going to be deeply damaging, I would say, for the regulated sector, because as we made the arguments throughout the campaign that the only real winner out of this whole process is going to be the black market, when I never thought I'd say it, but the UK now has one of the highest tax rates in the world. We've always been kind of seen as a proportionate, sensible place to do business from a tax and regulatory position. That is no longer the case now because of the political decision that the government made, as the regulated sector has to adapt and unfortunately shrink. As a result of the drastic tax increases, the black market is going to flourish. That's bad for customers, it's bad for operators, it's bad for the Treasury, it's bad for sport. I just simply don't understand the rationale behind the decision.
The policies and their impact on kind of, as you say, the UK was how it's been seen in the past. The impact on potentially other markets is something that's come up in this chair kind of all week with people I've been talking to from America, from Poland, from other European markets. But when it comes to the process itself, there was a quote from Charles Cohen at a panel earlier this week, and he said that in the lead up to this increase in tax, which is 40% RGD from April, he said that we haven't just failed to lobby, we failed as an industry. How do you respond to that? Obviously, you guys are central in this kind of discussion, I guess.
So obviously everybody's entitled to their own views. I would completely disagree with that. Obviously the outcome of the budget was disastrous for the industry, but that doesn't mean that the industry didn't run an effective campaign. We led a data-led, evidence-driven, sustained campaign representing the industry, highlighting all of the issues that would come to bear if the taxes were increased. Unfortunately, the government took a political decision because of political reasons, which is outside of the industry's control. So I'd actually disagree that the industry failed in our efforts. Obviously, we were hugely disappointed to see the outcome, but I find it hard to see what more the industry collectively could have done to change the government's mind.
So if you reflect on that, given what you've said about, what you just said, that hard to see what you could have done more, but the outcome that we had in the end, and as you say, political and external factors, have you kind of had the chance to review strategically and think, well, what can we do next? What can we do differently, given that we've seen now how the current government is going to act in the face of the methods we used before?
Yeah, so I think there were some positives that came out of the budget, which we shouldn't forget. Obviously, machines gaming duty didn't increase. Obviously, there was a positive outcome on bingo duty. I think what could we have done differently? We focused on the economic contribution that the industry provided because obviously it was a treasury decision on whether they were going to raise the taxes, and if they were, where would they fall? Potentially we put too much effort and focus onto the economic arguments,
Hmm.
and maybe we should have added some more of the kind of consumer impact and customer views on what the tax would have meant, to balance it out a bit. But again, as I say, at the end of the day, the government took a political decision, and I do really feel like the industry put up the best possible fight they could, just
Hmm.
obviously didn't get the outcome we wanted.
Yeah. I mean, it's good to kind of hear that immediate reflection of things that could have been done differently. And as you say, there's certainly a political factor. Certainly, in the UK, it's a vote winner to bash gambling. Unfortunately, that's just a reality that we kind of have to accept. But the argument against black markets, which I think we all in the industry understand, putting that forward, something I asked Stella David in Tain was, we still see, and I will point out that Andrew Rhodes, I've interviewed him, and he said that compliance has definitely improved over the years considerably. But we still do see occasional fines, and we see kind of AML, or not so much AML, but maybe social kind of failings from leading regulated operators. Does that perhaps undermine the black market argument? Because you might just get a consumer maybe on Twitter saying, well, they've just been fined for the same thing that the industry's saying black market operators are doing.
So it's a fair point, but I would probably say that it actually undermines the importance of the regulated sector versus the illegal market. If when the fines or the regulatory settlements occur, these things are reported, they're actioned, they're
Hmm.
sanctioned, the changes are made within the regulated sector. We now have a really good process where we share learnings among the regulated operators and suppliers of things that they have learnt through the process, and that obviously drives up standards even more.
Hmm.
In the illegal, harmful black market, you get none of that. They obviously
Yeah.
pay no tax, but more worryingly, they offer no play protection whatsoever. Customers don't know whether they're even going to get their money back. They don't know where that money's going to, what it might be funding. So I don't think it undermines it. I think it probably underlines the importance of having robust regulations in the regulated sector so that customers know what they're getting and who they're gaming with.
Fair enough. In one of the select committee hearings before, in the lead up to the disastrous budget for the industry, there was a quote you made about. In fact, I don't remember the exact quote, but you'll know which one I'm referring to, because there was almost shows you perhaps what the industry's up against. There was a bit of a backlash, arguably even overreaction, but to something you said in a hearing. Obviously, certain newspapers, were quick to run headlines, but I don't know if you maybe wanted to maybe clarify what you actually said, or just how you reflect on the reaction that kind of thing got.
Yeah, so the point I was trying to make was one of proportionality,
Hmm.
which I think it can be tricky now, having been there to do that in that sort of setting.
Hmm.
The point I was trying to make is that obviously gambling related harm can be hugely negative for individuals and also their families. And there's nobody that takes that more seriously than the regulated sector. That's why we have a range of measures in place, whether that's deposit limits, timeout, self exclusion, AI and technology to track behavioral markers in players. But actually, the evidence is clear that the vast, vast majority of people, 22.5 million every
Hmm.
month in the UK, do gamble safely as part of their leisure and entertainment.
Hmm.
We know from the NHS statistics that 0.4% of the adult population have a problem with their gambling harm. And therefore, you cannot say that gambling causes social harm per se. Of course, it does for a small minority, but it doesn't for the vast majority. And I actually think it's quite ironic, sadly, that the individuals on the select committee who seem so concerned about harm
Hmm.
are actually the same individuals that have been proposing policies which have now going to come into force that will actually increase problem gambling related harm by pushing customers to the black market.
Strategically, how do you think, or I'm sure there's been discussions with members, without giving any trade secrets away, but how do you think operators might adapt? I mean, a speculative one from me, but is it worth potentially focusing a little more on sports betting than online casinos, simply because there's now a 15% higher margin on it, or lower margin.
Yeah, so I don't think it's any secret that the businesses are having to go through a root and branch strategic review because the taxes are increasing so much that they are going to have to look at three real levers, product, people, and promotions. There are going to be efficiencies across all of those areas, including high street venues. We're going to see offers and odds reduced. We're going to see, less places. We're going to see reduced return to player. And I think more broadly, the businesses are going to have to look at diversifying outside of the UK, because the UK, quite frankly, is now not an attractive market to be when you compare it to the rest of the world. So unfortunately, I think you will see less investment and innovation in the UK as a result of the budget increases. Will operators try and persuade more players into sports versus casino? I don't think that's doable, because there is one P&L, right?
Sure.
So there's lots of benefits of people playing on both casino and sports. I think if you were to put in kind of weird incentives, that just doesn't work for the player, doesn't work for the operator. So I don't see that happening.
Okay. Looking ahead to 2026, I want to put a positive frame on a question, because obviously it's I used this phrase earlier this week, that the reality of our situation kind of dictates what we have to talk about. But on a positive note, what can we expect from the BGC in terms of campaigns, events, and certainly the AGM, which is a big event every year, is coming up soon?
So obviously, probably no surprise that the big focus for us will be on the black market. So in its entirety, I would say. So how do we track it? How do we monitor it? How do we know if it's growing, how much it's growing by, who's operating in it? But also trying to get some real traction on trying to prevent it. So whether that's with the payment providers or the internet service providers, or those that are marketing and promoting the sites, really kind of putting some pressure on them to stop doing what they're doing. So that will be a key focus for us. Also improving and continuing to adapt our safer gambling commitments, funding and supporting sports. Those are probably the key focuses of our AGM.
Well, Grainne, thank you very much for your time. It's been a busy week here at ICE, and I'm sure you're going to have a busy year ahead. So thanks for joining us.
Pleasure, Tim. Thanks.
Thank you.